All right, welcome to our Thursday, February 2nd, 2023 Roanoke County School Board work session. We'll jump right into call to order. Madam Clerk?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Here.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Item 2.01, discussion review of space requirements for the new CTE Center. Mr. Todd Kegels.
Good evening, everybody. So Dr. Nicely asked us to bring Chris Phillips from RRMM just to briefly discuss how they arrived at the square footage recommendations that they gave us for the CTE Center, and then mainly for you guys to be able to ask questions to help everybody feel comfortable that the recommendations are what we want to go with.
This will largely be a review of actually what was presented back in November. There's a lot of information, so hopefully you'll be able to process that and generate whatever questions you have. And I think there's some new information too that you want to talk about as well. So thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Well, good afternoon. It's good to be back with all of you all again and spend a little time with you talking about this project. I'll just kind of do a brief overview of the process, and please stop and ask questions along the way if anything intrigues you, if you need more detail. But we were commissioned late last year to examine the opportunity for this new BCAT Center, and it's not a project that was new to RRMM. In fact, it had quite a bit of history, so over the years leading up to that, we had studied this several times. Several different approaches were explored, but we came with fresh eyes in the fall to kind of take another new look. So the process really started with creating a program, and from that program, you generate a building square footage that is appropriate, that is right-sized. That's the idea, is that we right-size this building. We think about not only the needs for today, but what may come 5, 10, or even longer, looking further out many years as best we can in our little crystal ball. So we began the programming session with Jason and Christian and Todd and Dr. Nicely to talk about what is included in this center. And I know Christian and Jason did quite a bit of legwork even leading up to that. They had a very good foundation for us to get started with. Did quite a bit of research on their own already, looking at other centers and what's happening in the industry and what can support program space in the building. And so from that, we were able to begin with examining what programs are in the building and how big do they need to be to support not only what may be needed today, but moving forward. These buildings are oftentimes we try to design them so that they're flexible, adaptable, because these programs, some expand and grow very quickly, and they can be very cyclical and depending on what markets are doing and what the demands are. So we generated a program with multiple different, what we would indicate as centers, Center for Technology, Center for Transportation, things of that nature. And from that created what we feel like is a reasonable footprint of about 155,000 square feet, give or take. So that was not one that, if we could have everything in the world, what would it be? It's a very conscientious effort to make it something that is needed and required and right-sized. So the building started out even larger than that, and we really examined, okay, what's happening across the Commonwealth in buildings similar to this? What does the industry really require? Because some of these spaces are driven by equipment sizes and standards that we may not necessarily see in a traditional school building. So we have to dig a little deeper into that research as well. And so from that, we created the building program. And we were working with civil engineer Balzer and Associates as well. They examined the site, made sure it was a good fit. The footprint and the program could fit on the site is really was a good exercise to test fit that. And so from that, we were able to start generating a cost estimate based on what we're seeing in the industry. As you all are aware, construction market is very volatile and has been for several years due to the pandemic and things that are happening globally. that do impact construction. So right now, the square foot cost, for instance, we would recommend hovering around somewhere $400 or so a square foot. So this is an order of magnitude cost estimate. It's not a line item by line item. In other words, we're not counting bricks. We're not counting nuts and bolts. It's an order of magnitude square foot cost estimate that we would feel comfortable saying this is a good foundation for a budget moving forward. So that's kind of the process in a nutshell. From that, we generated several images, site plan, conceptual site plan, conceptual building elevation, and even some space planning diagrams to help us understand how these spaces within the program relate to each other, who shares spaces, and things of that nature. So that's really the effort that was put in towards the end of last year. And from that, Dr. Nicely, if you want me to continue with our
Unless
latest.
there's any questions about the process.
Yeah, I'll pause there.
I don't think so, but the 10-person committee was a part of this process, correct?
Absolutely. And really, like I say, Christian and Jason were just integral to the whole programming and conceptual design effort, as well as Todd and Dr. Nicely. And the input from the committees was really critical in forming, things that may not necessarily be bricks and mortar necessarily, the intangible things, and even talking about, renewable energy sources and things of that nature as well. So they were involved in the process.
So straight building costs are estimated somewhere in, if I did the 155,000 square feet at $400, about 62 million.
Yeah, we did a fairly detailed order of magnitude estimate. At 155, it's almost 156,000 square feet. By the time you add the site work cost, which is on top of that $400 a square foot, and then you also had some spaces that are just covered, right? So storage of material, things that spaces that are at a lower square foot cost just because you don't have to put in heat, electric, and things like that. Mm-hmm. So that total hard cost at that time, at the end of last year, was right around $72 million. And hard costs, when we do our estimates, hard costs are the bricks and mortar, the things that if you turn a building upside down, they're not going to fall out, right? That's the hard cost of construction. The soft costs are things that would include like FF&E, so furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And in this building type particularly, those are elevated because of the machinery and things that goes into these programs are typically a little more expensive. Luckily, many of these CTE programs can partner with agencies that will provide or donate or help support that equipment. So some of those costs that we can't really identify yet, but soft costs would include, furniture, fixtures, and equipment, some contingencies, and then, of course, your fees for testing, inspections, permits, design fees, and so forth. So you have hard costs and soft costs, and at that size, back in October, we were north of $90 million total.
Right, and so that kind of begs the question of where I'm going with this. If we can do what we're talking about doing, to kind of bundle this with the two elementary schools, we're recognizing that we may have to shave a little bit of the cost, bring down the scope just a little bit, maybe 10%, 8%, something like that.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm asking, when you say north of 90, we'd love to come in the 80 range. So, I don't know, and again, I don't understand, so I do residential, but this is out of my league. So when you're talking about, when I rough the cost at 62, you're talking about another 10 million of other factors.
That's right. And there are ways to go back to this program and re-examine some of the priorities as well. And there are, within that program, there were several sub-programs that we included as alternates. In other words, if the money were to happen to be there, this program could really take off. What would that cost be? So, we could expand that net some and look at what are some other alternate programs that you may look, Because at the end of the day, the cost is in the square footage, right? So if you want to reduce costs, you reduce square footage. It's the easiest way to get there in a building of this size.
But I guess my question to that is, if we reduce from 155,000 square feet, 145,000 square feet, does that 10 million change?
Oh, yeah, that is all, yeah, absolutely.
It's all a
Because
factor.
let's say I'll use an example, the equipment costs, right? For now, we would estimate this CTE-specific equipment at about $18 a square foot at 155. That's almost $3 million just in equipment. Well, as the building gets smaller, that ratio
less of
goes
that.
down as well.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
a question.
Yes.
So, in the beginning, the first draft that I saw, there was an asterisk at the bottom that said, maybe in the future, if money allows,
Right.
which we know we don't have extra money, because whoever really does, HVAC and collision should be considered. I would like to see this revamped so that HVAC and collision are in there from the start, not if we have plus plus. So is there a way to put that in there and get it down to the price that we're talking?
Yeah,
Or,
I think.
I don't know how big HVAC is or
Right.
collision in terms of space, because different technologies require different space.
That's right. To answer your question, absolutely. There is a way. I think it really comes down to what are the priorities in the program, right? If that's a higher priority,
It is,
then
yeah.
absolutely, we can look at putting it back into the main building program. But if we don't want to increase cost, then what comes out, right, instead of? And that's kind of the question that I think we have to ask collectively, obviously, if we're lucky enough to be your architect, that's one of the first things we want to drill into is, okay, let's reexamine these priorities. We know we have a target budget, right? So I may not know what that target budget is, but it sounds like you're starting to formulate in your mind, okay, if A, B, and C, this is our target budget. If that's the case, then we would start with that target budget and work backwards. Okay, what do we need to examine as a priority and what is maybe not a priority at this time in order to meet that budget? So we would design to budget. It would be an approach.
I guess what we're looking at, obviously, we want functionality more than anything. It's the public's money.
That's right.
We got to be fiscally responsible with that, and we've got other infrastructure needs at hand that we're talking about. So we want to try to make the most out of what we can.
Absolutely.
In this 156,000 square feet that we're talking about, how much is actually functional and how much is open spaces and those types of things that are not instructional areas?
Sure.
I'm more along the lines of, if this were a private business, how would we build this versus we've just got $90 million, let's just put all $90 million into it.
And
So-
if I can add on to that, the multi-purpose uses of space, right? That's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Like,
So, to be very direct, we think that the program, the conceptual building that's been done, certainly that's going to evolve, right? As you move into a true design process with a full design team, that building footprint is going to give and take and move. But what's been presented is a very efficient building. It's laid out in such that very little corridor space, as much as possible, capturing all spaces, usable space. What we do try to do in that process, though, is what are the functions that can be shared? In other words, where do programs overlap? Do we have flexible space that maybe isn't assigned to one particular program, but maybe 3 particular programs can use it as a classroom? Because they're not always going to be using it at the same time. That's a scheduling and operational question.
Right.
So I think overall, there's quite a bit of shared space in the building. I think there is some space that may not be 100% utilized 100% of the time, that you could examine, does this really belong or not? But I believe the 155,000 square foot program is really efficient. It may just be too big overall, if it's not matching the budget.
Well, that brings up another point. So for clarification, for each program, can you explain to us how it was determined what kind of space they actually needed for each different program?
Oh, sure. So very simplistic way, we sat around the table, the conference room table with Jason, Christian, Todd, Dr. Nicely, and we went through what are kind of the building blocks of the program. In other words, you had Center for Transportation, where you might have collision repair, auto body, things of that nature, construction trades, computer science, cybersecurity, all of the things that Jason and Christian have researched and say this program will be supported. And we started with those big building blocks, and then we broke those down. Okay, what kind of space is needed for a cybersecurity and technology center, right? So then we talk about, is a classroom needed? Is more than one classroom needed? What kind of lab space? What goes in that lab space? And so classroom size is often driven by, in a typical high school, middle school, elementary school setting, classroom space is driven by how many students, right? How many students are you trying to serve? Labs aren't quite as cut and dry. You have to understand, okay, am I working around a car body or am I working with a mechatronic small micro scale? And then understand what goes in that in order to size it. So we use good judgment, previous history, of our projects, CTE projects that we've done successfully, projects that they have seen other places. Hey, this is a great size room. This is exactly what we would need. So it's a good portion of those that aren't necessarily assigned, let's say, by the DOE. DOE would say this classroom for this many students needs to be a minimum of this size. Pretty straightforward. Lab spaces, like a CTE lab, not quite as clear cut. So we use our best judgment, previous projects, and some historical data to help build that program. So from that, we can say, okay, this lab space needs to be 1,000 square feet, and we build each building block with those smaller building blocks. So we would go through each center, for engineering and technology, sciences, performing arts, et cetera, and build those smaller spaces underneath it to come to a total building square footage that we think is reasonable. And then we'll examine that again and again. Okay, is this really the right size? Is this really the appropriate number of desks, tables, et cetera? And really scrutinize that program until we think we have it where it needs to be.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, so to your point, there's been a lot of work that has went into this. The one thing we cannot afford to do wrong is to undersize this facility. Now, we're talking about, trying to drive this down just a little bit, find some fruitions that we can cut 8 or 10%. But the one thing at the end of the day, not only for our students, for educational purposes, but I believe the bigger picture is the economic development and revenue piece that we can drive from BCAT, is we cannot screw this up and not make it big enough to have the capacity to generate the workforce development, the educational values a given, that we cannot, we get one shot at this as we're finding out how hard this is to get this done and get the money and trying to get, keep our other schools going and, for CIP. That's my only concern, is that I get that we want to right size this, but we've put 10 citizens on this for a year. Y'all have been involved, staff's been involved. I just don't want to make the mistake. I hope somebody will put the brakes on us if we start moving to a point where it's not benefiting our citizens and our students. So, but, so it's a balancing act.
It is, and there are ways to help mitigate some of that risk. Good, smart planning so that the building can be easily expanded is, highly recommend that. Obviously, we don't want to paint ourselves into a corner, because some of these programs could really take off, and then you're back to where you are, where you have more demand than you have space. So planning the building so it can be expanded, absolutely critical.
That's a good point. So
That's an excellent point.
I'm going to give you an example. Before any of us were on the board, Bonsack Elementary, some of y'all probably know this, Bonsack Elementary, we were building for a capacity of 400. It's my understanding the first year, they had 397 students. Guess what they had to do? They immediately had to, now, that's not a problem now because, that population's students has come down, but at that time, they had to finish that fourth or fifth wing to make the capacity 500. So that, that's obviously what we don't want to do.
These buildings are really unique. They're infrastructure heavy. There are so many more elements to a classroom and lab in a building such as this than there would be in, say, a science classroom in a high school. What you also have to keep in mind, too, is sometimes these programs fizzle out, right? Over time, the demand changes or technology changes, and they just don't have the interest anymore. So these spaces have to be designed such that what may be a cybersecurity lab today, 10 years from now, needs to be a different function. So you have to really take that into account now, right? The dollars you spend today thinking that way will save you so much more 10 years when that program is no longer viable. So these buildings are super flexible. We try to use structural bays that are easy to have open, right? So we're not dealing with a lot of bearing conditions that can't be adapted. And so thinking in that way, not only making sure that the building's not too small, but how does it change in 5 or 10 years? And then obviously, how can we expand when we need to? All that needs to be taken into account in the earliest design stages.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
What would be the largest use? I would think maybe auto body, maybe auto mechanics. Would that be the largest use of our square footage? And I know they are important programs. We can't get,
Yeah. So
downsize too much.
construction trades actually take up the largest portion of the program.
Construction.
They do, and that includes several subsets, but any of the construction trades, the shop spaces, those are significant. Followed behind that is auto body, or I would say center for transportation. So anything that falls under that subset is just behind that.
Okay.
We definitely need the building trades.
Mr. Lennon?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the one thing we need to make sure we consider the collaborative space. I mean, they do such a nice job over at Burton getting the programs to work with one another that while it needs to be functional, we need to make sure that we have some of that collaborative space where those different programs can get together and meet.
Absolutely.
Some may look at that as fluff, but I mean, it's just important, a very important aspect of what goes on over there at BCAT.
Absolutely.
And we did an adjacency study with the space planning effort to say, okay, these three things really have a synergy that's unique, that they feed off of each other. The students that may be in this program and program B, they may work together on projects. So we tried to accommodate that sort of adjacency study, but also have a space for those things to happen. And it really is not only an educational tool to help them get through their projects, but it's showing them, hey, when I graduate and I'm out and I'm an electrician or I'm a welder or I'm a master plumber, I don't live in my little corner of the building. I have to collaborate with these people and get a project done. So the building is, and the architecture is just a tool for that to happen.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to kind of build on that, part of the vision for, including some space would be, one, not only the collaboration among programs, which is hugely important, it's a real-world, skill that we want our students to develop, but also interaction with area businesses. And we saw that in some of those centers we visited where you don't have to have this space for every single program, but you do need some space where businesses come in, sit down with students, and present a project or a problem they're working on in their business and get students to work on these things. You just need some space for that kind of thing. The other thing that I think is really exciting about the concept that we've talked about is, for all of these programs, you've got the skills the students are learning, whether it's, the automotive piece, whether it's the building trades, culinary, cosmetology. There's also the public facing, the customer service side of that, learning how to run a business in those areas, which means you have to allow for, some of those customer sort of interactions too. And those are some kind of things that we don't have the space for in the current building that we definitely want to incorporate here. And again, you don't need a lot of space for those kind of things, but it is part of the thinking and planning that have gone into this. Okay, may I ask just one question of Mr. Phillips, just to kind of focus our thinking a little bit. So, I think that, this is obviously conceptual work, it's estimated work based on programming. This is not, the design phase where we're actually having hired an architect to actually design the details of all this. I'm just curious, and I'm afraid I might know the answer to this, but as we're trying to find ways to maybe cut costs, when we get to an actual design phase of a building, typically do we see, savings, and we can kind of constrict and find those savings, and so the cost kind of, whittles down a bit in that phase of the project, or maybe the opposite happens typically, if that makes sense.
So, I'm not sure I understand your question.
Well, so right now we've got an estimated cost projection based on estimated cost on square foot, right? When we actually get down to brass tacks and, hire a design team.
Oh, yeah.
And get all the details worked out, what, I guess, what are the dangers, or that's probably the wrong word, but what's typically, what happens in terms of the square footage and cost?
So, you always have to be conscious of what in the intro we call scope creep, right? So design is a long, extended process. This is a big building, tremendous amount of hours, design hours, your hours, the design team's hours, goes into trying to produce a set of documents that, a builder, a general contractor can build from. So there's always an opportunity with that many hands involved that, there can be a creep in the scope. Sometimes it's inadvertent, so we always try to keep our hand on the pulse and make sure we're not growing and when we're trying to be shrinking. The design process itself, it will depend on your delivery method. The traditional design, bid, and build method, you're working with just the design team through that design process. We're providing you cost projections as we go through, whether we hire an independent cost estimator or we do it ourselves in-house. We'll be doing cost estimates at milestone dates. So typically there's 3 phases to a traditional design service: schematic, design development, and then construction documents. And at each one of those, we'll be providing you an updated cost. Right? Here's where we are today. Are we growing, shrinking, are we staying level? And then you go out to bid, and then you're at the mercy of the market, right? Who's interested? Who can do this? Who has the manpower? And they're publicly bidding the job. So it's a competitive process. In some of the other more non-traditional delivery methods, we might have a contractor on board early, and they're providing the cost feedback. They're providing a guaranteed maximum price at certain dates. So there's safeguards you can have in place if you do pursue a non-traditional delivery method, because your builder's on board while we're putting lines on paper, and we're a team. It's a design build team, and there are 2 different primary in the state of Virginia. You have this construction manager at risk process, or you have a PPDA process, and I won't get into the details of that, but the GC is on very early. So whether you go traditional or a non-traditional delivery method, there's safeguards along the way to make sure, are we tracking in the right direction, whether that be an independent cost estimator or your actual contractor on board at that time. So that's some assurance that you can have throughout the process. So I would say the other thing that we do during design is that we have a higher contingency early on, right? Because there's still a lot of unknowns. A lot can change. And so we always recommend to have that higher design contingency early on. And as we go through the design process from schematic all the way to construction documents, that contingency will shrink, right? So that money either goes back into the project or it's helping relieve an overage, right, somewhere. So we try to set that up as well. In schematic design, you might have 15% or so of your budget as a design contingency. And really, a design contingency is just to say, oh, you know what, we forgot about this particular room or program or need. Can you squeeze it in? Mm-hmm. And so we would have to eat some of that design contingency into the budget. But as you refine the design and you're getting close to construction documents, that design contingency eventually goes away. And then you have a builder's contingency at that point, once you hit construction. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of focus in. I'm also mindful of, if we, there's a lot of things to be worked out, but if we're looking at a July 2024 start date for something like this, there's a lot of work to be done between now and
We
then.
gotta
Oh,
get,
yes.
we gotta get moving.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, speed to market is critical. The market's changing daily. I'd love to say it's coming down, but we have not seen that yet. So we try to keep our eyes on it as best we can. And,
So it's critical for us to get with our counterparts and get this funding fixed and ready to go.
So, Mr. Hens, Mr. Phelps, I have one more question
Sure.
for you. So, in your experience with building these CTE centers, how many have people have come back and said we overbuilt, or we underbuilt, or we hit it right on the nose?
That's, we never, I can't say that we have heard that we have overbuilt.
Okay.
I think the support for these programs across the Commonwealth right now are phenomenal. The student interest is huge. And so, right now, I would say that you're probably not going to hear that you've overbuilt. If you look at the interest that you have now at the Burton Center, you're having to turn people away. Right? Your
Yeah.
programs are at capacity.
So we're at capacity, and I don't know what the percentage per program that we've turned away. So my next question is, what percentage increase have we allowed for in each program? Like 20%, 30%, 50%? Is there a magic number that you guys added to get to that space?
That's a great question. I don't know that I know the percentage right offhand.
And
Jason.
Mr. Sirk can maybe speak to that
Yeah.
best,
Jason,
but
do you know?
I would say it varies from program to program. I'll say what I know, and you correct me and fill in the rest. But there are certain programs, I'll use the cosmetology as an example. It's a wonderful
pretty big.
program, but it also has some OSHA caps on it.
Mm-hmm.
The market, I think Mr. Sir would say, the market doesn't support expanding that program, so there's probably not a need to do that.
So they'll stay at 40, are they about 40?
Take 20 a year.
We do 20 a year, okay.
There's 20 a year, there's 3 years of the program, total of 60. 20 can be in the class at one time.
Whereas,
Okay.
whereas building trades has already been mentioned, and, everything dealing with the automotive piece, there's definitely the need to expand and room to grow in those programs. Would that be accurate?
That's correct. So for like building trades, we look at expanding there and having some opportunities to take more students. And with collision repair being in the same vein of auto service, we meet more student need there while meeting industry need.
And we don't have collision
We
now,
don't have
right?
collision now.
So collision, that is, if you pull that one back, but for the building trades, how many kids are we turning away right now for building trades?
Last I heard, first, second, third choice, Mr. Kish was talking 90 students wanting to get into that program for
90.
the first year.
Wow.
There's no way we have that type of.
90.
So now it's first, second, third choice, but
Okay.
we have ample need. We have that HVAC.
You
hope,
might, yeah.
And that would be in a similar vein, so we'd be able to assume that some of those students would be able to get into that. So that would be an expansion on the building trades side.
Okay. So are we doubling that program, or coming close to doubling that
would be
program?
the hope.
One thing that Mr. Phillips brought was, there's been some discussion about maybe some current programs that we would either, discontinue or perhaps relocate in the name of bringing in the collision repair, especially the HVAC. And I don't know if you all had a chance to see what I think I sent it out today. You look across the state, the programs that we do not have currently that are the most common ones that other places do have would be those two. And of course, industry says those are a big need. So I know he has that information in terms of if we swapped out those programs and added those, what that would be. I mean, we can get the square footage down by, taking out a couple of the programs that we've discussed, but then you're also adding back in
Right.
the other ones.
Right.
But, yeah.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd buy me just a little more time while I did everything.
Oh, sorry, I keep talking.
So I have the first step of that right here in front of me, so I can speak to that first. But one of the potential programs, and this, of course, this is conceptual and at a hypothetical level, but one of the potential programs we may look at, or you may consider removing from this particular building, is the performing arts, right? So there are two sections of performing arts. One of them is the performing arts and production, and the other is visual arts and museum studies. And, while it's a phenomenal idea and concept, maybe they're not exactly the right fit for all the other needs that are in the building right now. So by pulling those out, we take a building that was at about 156,000 square feet and we reduce it to 136,000.
So that was in that number?
Yeah, it was.
Oh, yes.
Wow,
Oh, yeah.
okay, so that is huge.
Yeah. So if we were just look at pull out, and maybe
didn't realize
maybe
that.
this is, again, going back to, is this an alternate? Is it a building designed such that, your architect and engineering team, maybe this is in the design, but it's a piece of the building that can easily be an alternate. In other words, we can build this whole building without it. It's not in the center of the building, in other words, which right now it's kind of in a main spine of the building.
Oh.
We would want to pull that out, right? So if we do that, the building costs, the hard costs, come down to 64 million.
Which I didn't realize that was still in that.
It is.
It is.
But then consider,
We
how
need to
badly
add-
do we want to add in
But
the collision repair and
collision
HVAC?
rep-
Because it doesn't include those.
It's not in there.
Do we
so
know how
that's-
much square footage that those two programs would increase?
That's where I'm looking right now. So
So-
collision repair, if we were to add that back in, and if someone wants to just kind of take some notes so I don't have to dig through my laptop while we wait. If we add back in collision repair, it adds 4,515 square feet. And so remember, we're starting at 136,525. And then, find it here. Here we go. One of the other programs to think about adding back in, if you so choose, dental assistant.
Yes.
That adds in 2,460. And then another alternate we had was flexible program space. In other words, flexible 60-student classroom types, collaborative spaces.
Like a courtyard or something.
That adds 3,400 square feet.
But you didn't talk about HVAC yet.
Let me back up.
While he's finding that, we explained the flexible program space is really more thinking, either to give us the nimbleness to add another program, within, let's say, 5 years, because, these things can change, certainly within a 5 to 6 year program. So really, the idea of having flexible space would be having somewhere to grow program-wise if the need arises.
Thank you.
And I thought this was the case, but I did want to speak and tell you something that isn't accurate. The HVAC lab, it's in that 136,000
Oh, it
square feet
was?
already.
Oh,
Yes,
is it?
it's in the program.
Okay.
Great.
What about visual arts? How much is that taking up?
Visual arts, when we remove it, we remove, hold on just a second.
That's basically 2 classrooms.
Yeah,
It's not
visual arts
big
and
space.
performing arts both ends up being about 19,000 square feet.
20,000.
Yeah, 20,000 square feet.
But
So we're at 146 plus.
With those changes.
Yeah.
if we
With those
add.
changes.
146.
146.9.
So we've just cut about 500,000, right? I
So-
mean, 5 million. If,
We went from 156 to 146.
Yeah, instead of the.
so
Or
now.
And that's
147.
including 2 new programs.
And that's
Right.
including programs
Three,
that are
actually.
huge to our workforce.
So by adding those back in, to kind of wrap a bow around this one, taking out performing and visual arts, not putting anything else back in, you're at 64, roughly, 64.2. Adding those alternate programs back in, you're at 68.3.
So 69.
And then that's hard cost.
But just to clarify, the 64, that does include HVAC?
It does.
Okay.
It is in the program, yes.
Okay.
We had long
So we're
discussions
down to
about
88
HVAC,
right now.
plumbing,
If we do
electrical,
But
how all
dental-
those work.
Dental wasn't in there and collision.
And the
I-
flexible
And the
space.
flexible, and so the flexible
So
space
really,
would
it's
give
just
you, if there's
4 million
another health
that
field
you're
coming down the
saying.
line,
Right.
which I see happening.
Yes.
Well, 5 if you don't round up.
Yeah, so then you're at, we're at 88. We've added what I think are 3 great programs that we're once. So now we're at 88, which makes it, you know, we're getting there. If we can get some help playing ball for funding, we can make all this happen. Still got a little bit of room to go, but
So to take those out and add back those, it looks like you're gonna add back 20,000.
No. You have 15,000. We went
Yeah,
from
it's,
one.
it's a little less than
It's
what we
less.
started with.
You're not back up to the total, because we started at 156, dropped down to 136,
And then adding.
Back
in
up to 147.
About
147.
147, yes.
I think Mike is saying if you added all of the arts back in, it would be 20,000.
It's about
Oh.
20,000, yes.
In addition, yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
But again, that may be, and you may consider in the future, maybe that's a wing of the building that is easily not built on day one. It can be added if the program is so
Could
supported.
come back and.
Mhm.
I also think, I mean, you know, and people have different views of this, but I think this also could be an opportunity to retool some of those programs, really emphasize those performing arts programs in our base schools, and actually have more access for all of our students in the base schools versus having to travel over, and that might be, you
A
know,
good thing.
something that's better suited to a division our size and the way our schools are spread out. So that's just something else to consider.
And I know those base schools were struggling. We were combining Cave Spring and Hidden Valley just to do a theatrical production.
Sure.
It's difficult for them.
Well, and I think they can put some real quality work out if they have a good instructor. I know at Glenville, we have an excellent performing arts teacher who does a great job. He does several performances throughout the year, and it's just amazing what he does. I can't imagine it being any better at the level that they're at. So,
And if I could add to that, there, in terms of being a workforce building, within our community of Roanoke, we have other avenues for those students who are pursuing performing arts. We have Mill Mountain Theater, we have, I mean, there's a lot of other, we don't have an HVAC school. We don't have a collision repair school.
And they are needed. We know that's a workforce.
And those are programs you have to have in the center. You can't farm that out someplace else.
And I just like to say, it's not because any of us are not pro-arts. I love art museums. I think they're fabulous. I love the arts, performing arts in particular. But I just don't see how that's going to serve our community in the best interests of the community and be fiscally responsible.
One last question related to programs. How about the Navy program that we've got at Byrd? Is that already, that's already
It is in there,
incorporated,
yes,
right?
sir.
Okay. Because I think that's a great, one of the best programs that could be expanded if it were in a better location, you know, being in our neck of the woods. It's a long ways for.
Yeah, the hope
Glenford.
is for that program to go, because, you know, for the NDCC program that it currently is, we fund that as a school system. The hope would be to get the interest up to where that could actually become a JROTC program and therefore funded by the Navy.
They
So-
could get it back where it was.
Right, and realistically, it's gonna grow best if it's in the
Central area.
But it is already included.
And that is one of those programs where they have very specific requirements in order to become that program, that JROTC program that's supported. Everything from having a drill field of a certain size, and the requirements of the classroom and the lab spaces are all very specific. And so if you meet those requirements, it aids in helping getting that
Well,
funded.
when we renovated Byrd in 2010, that was part of it, so. Anybody catch that? No, nobody caught it? Thank you, Todd.
I thought it was the front entrance.
That's right. That was a snide comment. Todd caught it.
anybody have anything else for?
I think it's good. Good info.
We appreciate your time and all the
Thank
work
you.
that you've put in and coming
Sure.
back and clarifying these things
Absolutely.
with us.
Anything with the elementaries, though? Did we do anything with those?
Well, you're gonna describe the scope of work.
I can, we're getting started on that right now. I'm working with Todd to schedule some meetings, but we're gonna approach that in kind of a similar fashion. Really, we have kind of a four-component scope of work with both of those schools, and this is a very high-level study, much like this. We're not getting down into nuts and bolts here, but we're very high-level. And so the purpose is really just to ask the question, what is the viability of renovating and expanding these buildings, creating a more traditional private classroom approach rather than the open plan design? And so what we're trying to schedule now are some field visits with our entire project team, engineers as well, so we can look at building systems. And, we want to ask the questions, what is due for replacement, what's not working well, all those things. Because it's not just about the program here. We got to understand full costs of renovations too. So we're trying to schedule those walkthroughs here in the next week or so. Then we're going to sit down with administrators and curriculum directors and all the stakeholders that Dr. Nicely is going to invite to the table. And we're going to do a programming session and ask the questions, how many kindergarten classrooms, how many first grade classrooms? Because we really want to examine, can the building support the classrooms you need as it's designed now, or do we need to expand it? Is it too big, too small? And these open school plans are sort of unique, because once you start cutting them up, you might have to add some back in order to get all the classroom spaces you need.
That's what we need to explain to our counterparts. You can't just put up walls.
Right.
That won't work.
So we're gonna take this all the way back as if we're programming the school from the beginning again. And we're gonna ask questions like, what is the current student population, and what are the projected populations? And we'll look as far ahead as we can. So if you're 450 now, will you ever be 600? And will this building ever support that? And again, I'm just throwing that out there, but those are the questions we're gonna ask. We're gonna build you a program, and then we're gonna test that program in your building. Does it fit once we start putting classrooms in there? And if it doesn't, where do we expand? How do we expand? And then ask the hard question of, how do you do construction with an occupied elementary school?
That's going to be fun.
That's the number one question.
That's going to be fun.
It can be done. It's a process, but we need to understand, and you want to understand now the phasing of that. How do we accommodate that, whether that be build a small addition first and then use it as swing space while the rest gets renovated? I will say, do we need to bring in temporary trailers while it's being renovated?
You have to say cottages.
Cottages, learning
Cottages.
cottages. So we're going to ask all those questions at a study level, and then we're going to try our best to put a cost to it. What's it going to take to do that at both schools? And so that study is underway. We're getting started right now. We're going to try our very best to get that turned around within about 60 days, so you can really look at this full picture, right?
Thank you. So Mr. Chairman, two quick questions, I'll be done. Is 400 square foot similar? Do you know if that's?
Renovation costs?
Yes.
That's a new construction cost.
Okay.
Renovation costs will be slightly less than that.
Okay, well, that's good.
Yeah, we have several schools right now that are either getting ready to be in renovation or are in the middle of renovation. So we have current active data on what that square foot number is going to be.
Okay,
And so it'll be a little less than 400.
okay. And I guess we'd make this, well, I guess you'll go through this. I was thinking initially the new schools being, you could just design one, but I guess, because they are the same footprint.
They
so-
are. And right now, as we speak in the office, one of our architects they're building these schools in a 3D virtual model so that when we do this study, we can show you, here's kind of a cutaway view of your building. Here is the current layout, and then here is what your layout will be should you go to a traditional classroom building. And so it'll be very descriptive process and tell the story. And that's really what you're trying to do, is tell the story of how can we make these buildings work and expand, and what's it going to cost. So we're underway on that right now, so you can have a full grasp of this total effort in your CIP.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you all
you.
so much.
Appreciate
It's
it.
always good to be with you, and we hope to see you again soon. And I'm
Thank
going to
you.
sneak out unless you all. Thank you. Okay.
Item 2.02, surplus of unused items, Mr. Todd Kegels.
Yeah, this is just an information item. At the next board meeting, we'll be requesting permission to surplus the Frigidaire dishwasher, Kenmore electric oven, Maytag washer, Gibson dryer, 2 kilns, a small art easel, corner tree bookshelf, Weiler piano, large wooden desk, large USA rug, and a large equipment trailer that's no longer serviceable.
Any questions? Thank you.
Will that be on consent agenda?
For the next meeting, yes.
All right. 2.03, North Side High School artificial turf updates and drainage system discussion.
Yes. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of where we are on this and what's going on with it. If you'll recall, virtually every discussion we've had, we've made it clear that our plans were contingent upon the existence of a drainage system suitable for artificial turf already being in place on this field. We have done as much research as humanly possible, and we've spoken to just about everybody who's ever been associated with that, with the track renovation and all of the things that have gone on there. We hired a ground penetrating radar firm to go out, and they can actually scan underground to look for pipes and things like that. And then we actually went out there and dug it up. Actually, Mr. Linden joined us out there for a little while we were doing some exploratory digging, looking for the pipes. And we cannot find a suitable drainage system in place. It should have required two 12-inch drainage pipes down both sides of the field. As part of our research, we spoke with Balzer, thinking that they may have to design a new drainage system. And at that time, we discovered that they had actually already done this work in the past, back in 2014. That's where this diagram came from. The fellow that drew it still works there, and he said his recollection was that they did the design work, and then we elected not to put that system in. So this is the system that should have been in place, which was two 12-inch drain pipes down both sides of the field, and then tied together with a 15-inch pipe exiting over there behind the visiting side bleachers. So we looked for all of that, and were unable to locate any of it. We dug up one little 4-inch pipe down the home sideline, which isn't adequate to drain an artificial turf field. So mainly, I just want you guys to be aware that that was part of the planning process. Was the assumption that that was in place, and I've made that clear all along, so this really shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. But it's not there. We could not find it, and so there's going to be some additional expense when we have to put that in. Now, we don't know how much yet. It's currently out to bid. The turf project is out to bid right now. It's due back on Monday. Once we select a vendor and a product, then we'll get them to tell us what the specifications are for the drainage system that they need, and then we can get prices on what it's going to cost to install. Now, we did include some contingency money when we set the budget based on a cost estimate of about $900,000. We set $1 million budget. And we did that based on conversations with 3 different contractors, just getting them to, give us ballpark quotes that ranged from $900,000 to $1.5 million. Now, those were not bids. Those were not, their official bids. Those were cost estimates. So when the bid process is complete, then we'll have an idea of what the actual bids are and what it's going to cost to install the drainage system. Do you have any questions about that? That's not good news. It's not what, we wanted to hear, but it is what it is at this point.
Do you have a guess?
At what it'll cost to install it? Less than $100,000, I hope. I mean, we've kind of tossed it around with the guys in the department that are, have a lot of experience doing construction, and they think that those pipes can probably be installed. The problem is, those are relatively large pipes, and to get the slope that you need to go from one end of a football field to the other, one end of the pipe has to be really deep in the ground. And the deeper you go, the bigger the chance that you're going to hit something. That gets expensive. So you're talking about 2 trenches all the way down both sides of the field that are going to be about 8 feet deep at one end. So it's a pretty big excavation project, and if we hit something, of course, the cost would go way up.
And it adds time, too.
Yeah, that's right.
Am I missing that? I don't see it exiting in that diagram.
Bottom left,
Yeah, bottom left would be the.
Oh, is it in the
exit.
dotted area?
the dotted line.
Yeah, you kind of see it come out there.
When is that, what year is that plan done?
That's from 2014. And then the track renovations, I believe, were done in 2017, but they had started the design work earlier than that. So they actually did this one And then they did one after this showing leaving the existing drain system in place, which was the 4-inch pipe down the one side, but that's not adequate. It's not anywhere close to adequate for draining artificial turf.
This is going to show my ignorance, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Sure.
Is it possible that because we didn't have that drainage system, that's why they had a hard time growing grass?
So in our research and talking to so many people over there, that's what happened originally. They installed the Bermuda, couldn't get it to grow, and then they had to come back and install some drainage to get some of the water off of there so that the Bermuda would grow. And we think that's where the 4-inch pipe came from that was installed over there. But that's not, like I said, that doesn't come anywhere close to meeting the needs of
The needs of it. So
artificial turf.
that possibly could have been the issue.
Yeah.
Is that the best side, or would the other side be better for drainage? I know there's like a little creek or something back on the other side.
Well, the water actually, when you dump it out where Balzer has it diagrammed right there, that's where it eventually goes over to the drainage pond. So the stormwater detention pond is on the other side of the street, basically right across from where that exit comes. So really, it doesn't matter where you dump it out up there, it eventually all makes it to that pond. So it actually kind of is in the ideal spot right there in terms of getting it to the stormwater pond. There's a culvert that goes under the road. There's actually a concrete culvert that goes under
Are
the
there
road right
any
there.
geo study or anything you can get with equipment that's gonna tell you if there's rock in, so far down that you gotta go? And it might be a better way to get around that?
In terms of digging the trenches for the drainage. I don't know the answer to that. The ground penetrating radar that we use to look for the pipes only looks for voids. It doesn't, detect rock and that kind of thing. The good thing about digging in a football field, it's kind of like, digging on a farm. It's, you have a lot of good soil there. And so it was real easy digging when we went out and dug up a 4-inch pipe. But of course, we didn't go 8 feet down either.
What
I mean-
size pipe is that?
12-inch is what Balzer spec, 12-inch down both sides, and then 15-inch connecting the two.
Does anybody have anything else? All right, we
Look
appreciate
for
the
good
update.
news.
Yeah, well, and we'll, as soon as we have the guys, as soon as we have the bids back, we'll get a better idea of what it costs, and then we'll come back and tell you where we are.
Appreciate you.
Sure.
2.04, proposed 2023 secondary summer school calendars. Mr. Mike Riley.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. Just real quickly, we want to bring our summer programs to the school board for your consideration. Would hope to put this on the consent at the next board meeting. What Chuck's got up here first, and I've got copies if anybody wants to see them, but it's pretty similar to what we've done in the past at the high school level. The middle school program is going to be very different than what we've done in the past. We had to expand it and add hours to qualify for the grant that we're going to be using to pay for our middle school program this summer. I worked with the middle school principals to try and figure out how we wanted to expand that to make it work for our teachers and our students. What we've settled on is a Monday through Thursday schedule at our middle schools, and it would be housed at each middle school. It would start June 8th. That is a Thursday, so that'd be kind of a standalone Thursday to get started. Then they'd crank back up the following Monday. Students would go a total of 18 days. That takes us through July 14th. So about the middle of July is when the middle school program would end. The hours for students, if you see there, to get the total hours we need is pretty close to a full day. In the past, we've done half-days at the middle school program. They've run from 8 to 12. This will be 8 to 3:15. As a result, the programming will be very different. You can't put middle schoolers in a room for 8 hours and talk to them. So we're looking at doing some unique things in that summer program, bringing some electives in, doing some different things with the kids to get them up and moving, but involve those critical skills that they're going to need to be successful moving forward. We built in some prep time. And then, of course, as a result of the expanded program, there's going to be some days that they'll have to have off as well. The 9th is a federal holiday, that's Juneteenth. All offices will be closed. The 20th, the day after, that's actually Election Day, that most of our buildings are being used. So we really need to be closed on that day as well. And of course, it bleeds over the 4th of July, so that date will be closed as well. So did you have any questions about the middle school? Because that's the one that's changed the most. We'll look at the high school in a second. It's pretty much the same as it's been.
What was the change? The amount, you said it was because of the grant.
Yes, sir. There's a federal grant that's tied to student learning loss coming out of COVID. I think, Susan, we've talked about it. The requirements are 128 student clock hours. So to get the 128-hour requirements for that to cover the cost of our summer program, we had to add additional hours. In the past, we've used state reimbursement to run our middle and elementary programs, and the hour requirements for that are not nearly as extensive.
So no state, this is total federal?
Correct. Now, we'll still have some state monies that we can use to supplement this and help provide transportation and things like that. But to get the federal money, it has to be the 128 hours.
So you're doing lunch?
Yeah,
Lunches?
they'll have lunch in there, yes, sir. Now, at this point in time, we're not sure everybody would qualify for free lunch because that program, of course, is phasing out. They're hoping, I know we talked to nutrition, they're hoping that that might be extended. Of course, any student that's on free reduced lunch would still get a free lunch in the summertime, but at the very least, we would provide an opportunity for students to buy lunch there if the free program isn't extended.
Well, it's gonna stink to be in middle school summer.
I want to clarify, and correct me if I'm
Right.
wrong, it requires us to offer it this many days and this much time. If somebody already has vacation plans or
That's
something
correct.
and they have to
That's
miss
correct.
one of
They're-
the weeks.
We're not having to
we still
track
do it.
individual student hours, but the program has to run for 128 hours.
Do you perceive staffing to be an issue?
That's a concern, but honestly, what we found, and again, it's a limited sample size, the principals are already talking to folks, and the principals have come back with, quite honestly, some very positive feedback from staff, at least at the middle schools that I've been working with closely right now. Staffing doesn't appear to be an issue. I think what the trade-off may be is there are folks who want to work full-time jobs in the summer, like when they're done teaching, they need to do that to supplement their income in some cases. Well, when you have a 4-hour program, that's not full-time, so they have to find something else. Now with it being an 8-hour program, actually, we're finding that we might have more teachers interested, which surprised me. It's just it's a part of it I hadn't considered, but that's what we're finding right now.
Do you know the hourly rate?
It will be $30 an hour. Our normal rate in the pay plan is $25 an hour for any type of student instruction, and we're adding an additional $5 an hour.
Is that
To get to
competitive
30.
with what our neighboring districts are doing?
In most cases, yes. I think there are a few other districts who, I think Roanoke City is higher than that. But most of our folks, especially at the middle school, the draw for them is they get to teach in their own school and they teach their own kids.
Right.
And for a lot of teachers, that's a big deal. Like, we've got a lot of positive feedback from holding our middle school in the base schools for parents and teachers.
You don't have to drive so far.
Correct. Well, and you're familiar with the building,
Yeah,
the teachers know the
teachers.
kids for the most part. It's gone really well.
How many do we normally have sign up?
Well, of course, when COVID shot those numbers way up. We had all, when you remember when we shut down and when we did the hybrid, we knew that was going to be higher. We're back to more normal numbers, but quite honestly, it varies by school. There are some schools last summer who ran under 20, and there are other schools that ran closer to 60 just based on need and response by parents.
Plus the fact that we've, in a couple of recent years, been able to offer transportation has been a game changer.
That was a game changer, to be able to get, even for the high school program.
Mr. Shawnee?
Yep. Are you doing pre-assessments and post?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah, we're even looking at, because of the length of the program, we're talking about even doing that weekly. Because you do have, like we said, with students maybe need to take vacation, and the fact that there might be students you miss at the end. We've talked about doing weekly pre and post assessments just to track where the students are and make sure they're making progress.
Okay, good.
So I assume this would go on consent?
Yes, sir.
Tim, did you
And-
have something?
Yeah, I was
Yes, sir.
just going to say, I had a former board member stop by my office this week, and, I know we're looking at ways to help remediate the kids that need a little extra help. And I thought he had a good idea. It was, are we thinking about training our own folks to do those remediations instead of maybe an outside source that we've asked to come in to do some of that? And I thought, that's a great idea for some of our staff that may want, some extra hours or what have you. I don't know if that's, something that can be offered here, but,
Well,
As a
in
part
the
of the
summer
ESSER.
program, we would be using our own staff.
well,
for
but
it,
some of
so-
the, I'm talking
right.
about through some of the ESSER funds, some of that stuff that
Right.
we're doing with the,
During the school year, you mean?
yes.
Yeah, most of our mediators are our own folks.
Right.
The
Are
only
they?
thing that's outside would be like this new, online tutoring program we're trying.
Okay.
Yeah.
So most of them are our folks. Okay. Well, I guess I thought we had discussed bringing an outside
We had, but that would be to supplement what we're already doing
Okay.
in the buildings.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
And then, just real quickly, the high school program, very similar to years past. It would start June 1st, run through the 29th. Students that are repeating classes would be there for half a day, so you could take 2 repeat classes at Northside. It will be at Northside again. The hours are the same as they've always been. Again, the only difference this year is we'll be closed on the 19th. We've talked with Dr. Stegall and the resource officer that'll be there. We feel comfortable in offering summer school at Northside while they have the special election going on, or actually it's a primary at that point in time. So we'll hold class on the 20th that day. So that's going to be very similar to what we've done in the past. And then our new classes are going to be offered, as always, through the academy. That'll run from June 1st through the middle of July. And students are already signing up for those. Yes, ma'am.
Have to ask the question, why are we doing it Northside again? Is there a rotation, I thought, or just
We
it's
used to do a
convenient?
rotation, but what happened was, you would go in and you had to kind of retrofit summer school to the facility. And in talking with the summer school staff, we can be much more efficient if we know the classrooms we're going to be in. We actually were able to build a summer school office there, so now they've got a dedicated space in terms of safety. We now have a dedicated entrance there with card swipes, with cameras, so that we're not encumbering the front office staff of any building. We actually have summer school kind of enclosed in its own space, and we were able to do that by just putting resources into one spot. Northside, we felt like was the best spot just because of the central location. There were summers where I can remember working summer school as an assistant principal when you were at Byrd. That's just a long trip, especially when we weren't offering transportation at that point in time from the Glenver area and places like that. So we felt like Northside at the time was the best choice. Talking with the principals, we all agreed that having it in a stable location would be better for everybody in the long run.
Okay, so going forward, it will always be at Northside?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
It makes sense. I mean, it would be
Right.
more efficient.
it is. It is, and it's a great space for the summer program, and the teachers like it because now they know what to expect. You work, it takes you a while to get traffic flow figured
I was
out
gonna
and
say,
how
even with
buses are
traffic
coming
flow,
and all
yeah.
those types of things. We work closely with the staff at Northside High School, and because you can evaluate the effectiveness of all those physical plant type things,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
from year to year, you can make adjustments and change and make it better each year.
Okay,
So it's going well.
that's good.
Mr. Chair? The funding for this, is it state?
That's going to be, we've got some local funds that we've budgeted for, and we're going to be able to use some of the federal grant money, not the money that's tied to the remediation, the 128 clock hour requirement. That's just remedial, because this is credit recovery. We have to tap into some other funds, but there's still some of our ESSER 2 funds, I think, that we are utilizing to fund this. And then, of course, transportation is kind of holistic because that runs all at the same time. So we should be able to provide transportation again this summer. Moving forward, I anticipate this probably being the last year we can offer credit recovery summer school free of charge. So in the past, as you guys know, we've had to charge for students to be able to take a repeat class at summer school, unless, of course, you are on free reduced lunch. If you're free reduced lunch, then you'd qualify for free summer school.
And these ESSER funds probably won't be available next year,
Well,
right?
I think this will probably be the last
Last
year
year.
that we have.
The ARPA funds in
Right.
September of 2024.
Okay,
We'll run through all of the ARPA funds with this current summer
Right.
session.
okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
I think we're good.
All right,
Thank you, sir.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Mr. Riley.
Thank you.
Yep.
Item 2.05, discussion of VDOE state budget error. Ms. Susan Peterson.
It's a long trip.
Hi, Susan.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Dr. Lyons, while I'm getting this set up, did you want to give an intro, or do you?
Sure, if that'll buy you some time. Well, and we've made the board aware that we've just in the last few days, and it's of course been in the news statewide as well, that apparently, I think it was January 23rd, the VDOE discovered that there is an error in their budget calculation tool. And that's the tool that, they send out with, it's a huge spreadsheet, very complex. There's a lot of behind the scenes and hidden tables and charts and so forth that no school division locally, can really get behind to know what all goes in there. So we, rely on that to be accurate. They found out that she's going to explain what the error was, but they sort of double counted something, which means that no school division in Virginia is going to get as much money this year nor next year as was initially shown by that calculation tool. Is that enough time?
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you. Yes, as Dr. Nicely said, we wanted to go ahead and bring the facts to you so that you could understand how this VDOE error impacted our school division, because when you look at the headlines that are flying around, $200 million across the Commonwealth is a staggering number. Basically what has happened, as Dr. Nicely didn't say, we will receive a calc tool. This is a very large spreadsheet that the Virginia Department of Education, they go through the legislature and they identify their funding. They put all of the school information in this spreadsheet. It's locked down, so we really don't see a lot of the formulas and the tables that they reference off of. In a minute, I'll show you a teeny bit of it. But basically all of the school divisions use this calc tool to be able to identify their state lines, because we get many different buckets of money from the state. And this is the only way that we really could be able to estimate our state revenues. I don't know any school division that would not use the calc tool to estimate their revenues. And what happened, it was a human error. We all are human, we all make errors, and they just forgot one little thing. Unfortunately, it was a big little thing. This is an excerpt of kind of what the heart of, although the calc tool has about 17 different worksheets that we can visibly see, this is the main one that we look at. And when you open up the calc tool, you run it for your school division. Oh, it's not showing me. Here, let me do this. Here's my laser pointer. So you run it for your school division here. You drop in a different page. You can either go with the pre-populated state ADM numbers. So that's what's in the black over here for FY23. The first column is the state share. The second column is what they project is your local share. So both of these together is what the state's saying, that's how much money you need to run the school system for that fiscal year. Now, we all know that that's not always right, because they put some support caps and some other items in here that that are nice on paper, but when you get into a school, don't necessarily fill the gaps that we have already put bodies in to ensure that the school is running efficiently, correct? So then we also have FY '24. So the first two columns are our current year. The last two columns are the year that we're under budgeting for next year. We've got our composite index in here, so you can see that's the 0.3643. And basically what happens, as I understand it, and I don't know the minutia that goes behind the back end, but the first two lines on our calc tool is basic aid and sales tax. And the way that I understand it is sales tax goes up, so they take a portion of our basic aid and it goes down. It is an inverse relationship, right? If sales tax goes down, then our basic aid goes up. I don't know how they come up with the formula. I don't know. We've not been privy to that. Hopefully, we are having a meeting, all of the school divisions, with the Virginia Department of Education next week, and hopefully they'll be able to shed a little bit more light on all of this for the finance directors and CFOs across the Commonwealth. But what happened this past year in the calc tool we got for FY '23, which came out last June, they broke out that grocery tax hold harmless. So that's this line down here. And in breaking that amount out, they've taken their sales tax number, which was one number, and they said, okay, here's sales tax and here's sales tax. They're both sales tax. They reduced basic aid by the regular sales tax with that inverse relationship. They forgot to pick up what they broke out down at the bottom. And so that's the human error that happened. They should have went through and reduced basic aid for a portion of your grocery tax down at the bottom. Clear as mud? See, that's why you have me. So basically, we got a superintendent's email last Friday, and they provided, this is how you would calculate it. They're not going to issue us new calc tools until crossover, because we're so close to crossover, and at crossover, this error should be corrected. But they gave us the formula. If you take 1 minus your local composite index and multiply that by that second line that I showed, that's how much effect you need to pull down your basic aid. So for our current year, we would pull down basic aid by $696,947. In our budget for next year, it would be $1.7 million. So if you recall, last time I spoke with you guys at the first budget work session, I shared the governor's budget, and these are the numbers we were looking at. We were looking at current year possibly having a $1.8 million surplus in our general fund, and next year, hopefully at max, an $8 million amount of funds that we could put towards good use with or employee raises and other needs. After what has happened, those numbers changed, and now instead of having as much of a surplus, we're still looking to have a surplus. So we're still looking to have a surplus of 1.1. We're just not looking at as much of a revenue surplus from the state. And then next year, our increase in the general fund, instead of being almost 8 million, it's only 6.3 million. So that gives us quite a bit less funds to work with.
So you do have the ADM, because we're a couple hundred over what we budgeted. So you have that in.
That's the key.
Yeah.
That's where our surplus.
Yeah, so
Well,
we had.
but
our-
that's the key
You're
why.
always ahead of me.
Sorry.
Sorry.
So the impact is, because ADM is trending higher, we're not seeing the loss like all of the other school divisions.
It's not gonna hurt us as badly.
Right.
Because our ADM came in higher than we budgeted for.
This is probably.
It's good when you have a budget.
Yeah, this is probably a crazy question, but we have a huge surplus right now in Virginia, right? Has anybody, any superintendents gotten together and lobbied to say, look, either we need to take some of that surplus and fund this mistake, or instead of hitting us all at 1 year, how about if we take this over 5 years?
So on our call with, and this is just with VDOE, not, General Assembly and those who make those decisions, but we definitely expressed to the VDOE folks that very thing, that, we understand this is human error, but, a lot of school divisions, are gonna, absolutely have to have some help, budget-wise to, help absorb this. I'm glad we're not as in dire straits as some, but it's still a huge loss.
That's a big deal.
It is a big loss, yeah.
And, so we've got delegates, right? And those people, I feel like we should be calling and saying, look, we need to, we get everybody makes errors, but we've got to find a way to lessen the blow. And like you said, there's a lot of divisions that aren't going to be in the same shape we are. I'm assuming they'll come up with some.
And Ms. Balo did say, as soon as they found this error, they immediately called all of the legislators and the governor and all the parties that can have a hand in helping us. So they're all very well aware of the situation and how dire this is for many of the school divisions. We're lucky. I couldn't be more thrilled and hope that it pans out the way that I think it will for us this year. But there are a lot of school divisions that really do need help. I have seen articles where the governor has said, I will ask the GA to ensure that this year no one loses money. But it said this year, so it didn't reference next year. So there may be a gap next year. I don't know. But they are looking at that. So.
There's a lot of pressure in place to do that very thing, at least for
Well,
this year.
we had 1.8, which was probably the smallest excess that we've had since I've been on the board. Now it's really down to 1.1.
When this is only revenue side, we're not looking at expenditures yet. We're working on the payroll projection to be able to look at the expenditures to see where we stand. We do know that our utilities are quite high, maybe, 75-80% of budget, and we're about halfway through the year. So that is disconcerting. So we are taking steps to go back and look at our expenditures to determine how we're looking on that side of things.
But that does not include personnel savings.
No, this is only revenue is all we're talking about here.
Right, okay.
So I do have one more slide. If there are any questions.
What was the
There are
answer
6
to
more
that?
weeks.
6 more weeks.
Oh, really? Of course.
That
think we're
was
gonna get one big storm.
6 more weeks of bad weather, or winter weather.
That's what
Hey,
Bill is telling us.
We can take 6 more weeks of what we've already gotten, because
That's right.
Well, we actually got
It hasn't-
haven't even-
some snow this morning. I actually drove over to Catawba this morning, because as soon as you hit Bradshaw Road, it turned to snow, and so there's a whole coating of white just over the mountain there this morning.
Wow.
Got some good pictures.
Thank you, Susan. Item 2.06, discussion of graduation regalia.
Where I get my 21 million.
Dr. Stegall, how are you today?
All right, so we have another version of 6.51 that I want to review with you, and we've made several updates to this one, but I just want to bring your attention to 3 areas where we've made some adjustments. If you take a look at under section B, number 2, and all of you have a document there, it's the highlighted section. It says, rules and policies of the school board will be enforced, including proper dress and behavior. Students are expected to wear appropriate clothing and footwear. Personal decorations, whether to the mortarboard or gown, are not allowed. Graduation gowns must be fully zipped, and failure to comply with these rules will result in removal of the graduate from the commencement ceremony. So that, just a little bit of language had been tweaked in that one. And so if you flip over to the back, under section C, number 6, this one, it says the primary purpose of the commencement ceremonies in Roanoke County Public Schools is to recognize and honor students' accomplishments in earning a high school diploma. Accordingly, only graduation regalia officially issued through the school may be worn at the commencement ceremony. Regalia issued through outside groups or activities are not permitted, or is not permitted. So that one has not been adjusted since the prior version that we shared, but I just wanted to bring that as a highlight since that is a change to the original policy. And then number 7, Graduation regalia such as cords for school honors or special programs may be issued in accordance with the standard of the corresponding honor society and traditions of the school. Such honors must also be approved by the school division administration. And so that one would had some adjustment as well. Any questions about any of those adjustments?
I guess this is a change, which is from the earlier one, which we had with, that would have been stating that students could go out and buy things and bring it in, and so this really nails that down. While I, still think about a list that we go, I think tradition, I don't want schools to get in the situation of, well, this school gives it and this one, you're not giving it. And I think that's, I want to make sure that the way you've got it worded certainly says with the traditions of the school, and if that's what they traditionally do, that does, cover some of that we had thought, in before, that I think was, one school issues athletics, another one doesn't. And I think this, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this covers the traditions of the school. If they traditionally hadn't, given this, then they will stay with their traditions as they going forward.
That's right.
Really, the substantive change, for number 7 in terms of what's currently in practice versus what would change would be the part about, having school division level approval of those. So that'd be the biggest change from what the current practice is. And I think, our conversations with the principals, that's something that, they think is workable. The characterization, that's what we've heard.
Any other things from the principals? Has anybody heard anything?
I think we've addressed all those in this draft of the concerns that I've heard. I think they've all been addressed in this current draft.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I know a lot of time and energy went into this. I think the end product is a good one.
Yeah, thank you for all your work. There's a
Sure,
lot.
thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
yeah, how many versions? We kept versioning down,
This
so
was
we
number 4.
finally got to it.
I think the key is that we have, the honors will be approved by the school board administration, so there's no question as to what is approved and what isn't approved, and you accomplished that.
Yeah, and that's, I see that point because personally, someone could feel like that's okay, and it may not be okay. And so I think this certainly keeps it from,
So this way, the principals don't have to make decisions. We have administration make decisions, which I'm sure is going to help them
and
out in
putting
the
the
future.
pressure on them,
That's right.
yeah. Okay.
All right. Thank you for all your hard work. Does anybody have anything else?
So do you want this to go on consent agenda for the next meeting?
I believe everybody's in agreement.
Yep.
Okay, for consent?
And just an informational item that I did speak to Chuck about us getting together to get with media to ask about the 21 million for the additional ask. So he'll either be speaking with you or some of us to see how we can move forward with that.
And what were you, I know we don't have the figures yet, but, I know you threw out some figures on renovation, for anywhere from 20 or whatever to renovate these schools. And I know we don't have numbers, but I'm just saying, the total that we were going to eventually get to, if we got 50, do you think 20 for each one, we would be at 128 roughly, I guess, right?
So we started out at 93 for BCAT. I think we had an estimate, correct me if I'm wrong here, 38 for Cundiff and 32 for Cove.
That was for new
So that's
renovation.
70 and 93, right? Am I right? 80 and 90, no, 38. 68, 70, 163 million is what we were looking at to get 2 new schools and BCAT. So what we're saying is that we would be willing to find a way to get BCAT down to 80. We won't, which I think is crazy for the difference in price. If you were a business, you'd build new elementary schools, but forego that. We need to make a sacrifice. We'll go to 30 million for the 2 elementary schools. That's 60. 80 for BCAT's 140. So if we're at, let's see, I'm gonna have to go from memory, but we're at 80 million that they offered one time. 17, which we're already, would be our year, that's 97. They offered to give us 2 to put up walls, that's 119, right? So we said they've got essentially 31 million of unidentified capital projects, plus they've got a library that they've got on their CIP. So we're asking for 21 million of those unidentified capital projects. If we do that, that would give us 140. We could then, if we can get BCAT to 80, we could do these elementaries renovation of some sort in the 30 million range. And that would make us all whole. And so I think we're all on board. We've all talked about the three schools need to be done now. Spoke to most of the board members, and we've sent the Board of Supervisors our summary just like that with, the facts of how we got here. And so now it's time to start seeing where we're at. I think there's a meeting this week with the chairman, and we need to start pressing forward, or we're never going to get this thing off the ground. As we heard earlier, we want to start BCAT July 1 of 24, and we don't have anything settled yet, but we could start those wheels in motion to be ready to hit the ground. We could do the same thing with the elementary schools if we can get the funding in place and we can get moving, which also brings up all those other schools into the CIP process.
Yeah, and as we refine our numbers, which we did a little bit today to 88 or whatever, and, as we refine those numbers, I think we'll have a better picture too.
Yep. So that's where we're at.
The math I just heard, 80 plus 17 plus 2, somehow we got to 119.
Right, so we're asking for the 21.
I don't know how 80 and 17 and 2 gets to 119. That's 99.
99. So I'm missing something
Can I
there.
clarify one thing?
Oh, the 20 million that's the 20 from the 2 years following that we would
Well,
ask. Yeah,
Barring
Yeah.
2020.
yeah, it's the 20 from the, because they're moving us from 17 to 20. I think it's in 27, 26, somewhere in there. We'd ask them to switch years with us, and then that would give us the 140, and we could make that happen. And they can do that within their borrowing structure, stay within the bond ratings and all that. We can do that. So,
Just to clarify one thing, and it's probably exactly how you said it, but I just want to make sure that I didn't misunderstand.
well, it could have been
Well,
different.
Because it would make a difference as long as everybody understands. So FY '25, the year where it says 80, it's 80 total, not 80 plus 17.
No, that's right,
Okay.
that's right. So it's really 63, so they're really, in my mind, underfunding BCAT, because we need the elementary schools done as well. So we're really getting 63 million to do BCAT, which is 17 under, in my estimation, if we can get it done for 80. And so, we can play with these formulas any way we want to, but if we can get to that 140 number, and I think we've agreed as a board, at least most of us here, that's where we want to go, and that's what we're going to talk to Chuck about and see if we can move the needle.
I just wanted to clarify that, because it's not the normal 17 plus 80.
Right,
It's
it's
the normal 17 plus 63 to get to 80 total.
Correct.
That's what was proposed.
Yeah, so there's really 2 years of 17, but they're calling it 80, if I'm right, and that's what we're saying. See what I'm saying? So there's 2 years of 17, but one of those, they're calling 80, so really, we're getting 63 additional. We're not getting 80. It looks like they're giving us 80, but they're giving us 63 over the normal structure. And then the 2 years later, it goes to 20, and I apologize, that was the difference in that.
Just move it to 20 sooner.
Yeah.
Is another way to look at it.
Right, yeah, that's right. We're just asking them to kind of push that up a little bit, and let's get this done. These open concept classrooms need to go away. Thank you.
Anything else? All right. Big thank you to Mason's Cove for that beautiful banner. It's like their kids put together for us.
That's a shameless plug.
I can't help, it's one of my beautiful schools in Catawba District that I absolutely love. Ms. Phelps does an excellent job out there. Meeting adjourned.
Election year.